Hello again, humans. It is I, Jim the Ape, and while I'm dealing with a sore throat and languishing in the ongoing torment of a physically draining job, an unrelenting schedule of working almost every single day at said job, and the sudden and tragic death of a coworker that I considered to be a friend, and I'm spending most of my off time either resting or playing Injustice 2, I figured I would bring back one of the few series concepts that ever really worked, the G.B.U, where I cover recent events that show the good, the bad, and the ugly sides of humanity. So without any further inane babbling on my part, let's get into the stories. First, let's talk about the mostly good. Now, I want to acknowledge that what people do in their personal lives and who they form relationships with is none of my business. And I wish more people could understand that basic concept, but I'll get to them in a minute. Anyway, I normally wouldn't talk about something like this, but it's public knowledge, which is why I even know about it in the first place. Okay, so well-known anti-feminist YouTuber Chris Ray Gun and infamous feminist YouTuber Lacey Green are dating. I know, it's crazy, but the thing is, Lacey has been a lot more open-minded lately, making references to taking the red pill and actually advocating for open and honest dialogue, which I'm all for. And since there was a photo of them together making its way around the internet before the news broke that they were dating, many had already shipped them together in their minds and started hoping for that to become a reality. And I can honestly say I think they make a cute couple, and I'm genuinely rooting for them to stick together through all the bad shit that I'm about to talk about. Because apparently these star-crossed lovers have been taking a metric fuck-ton of flack, mostly in the form of hate comments, from both sides of the argument. Feminists have been coming out of the woodwork to label Lacey a Nazi, or a traitor, or any number of other terrible things. Meanwhile, the more extreme anti-feminist crowd have been calling Chris a cuck, or a pussy-whipped beta male, etc. One of the worst offenders was Zinnia Jones, who I responded to in a guest video, which I believe was for Peach Bailey's channel, if I recall correctly. You can look up the exchanges yourself. I prefer to keep my latest meal on the inside of my body for now. But it gets even worse than that, because apparently some SJW cunt, or cunts, who used to consider Lacey Green an ally, were so furious that she chose to date someone they don't like that they decided to dox her. Look, I don't give a shit what side you're on. I don't care if your arguments are good or if you back them up with evidence or not. I don't care if you're the average, everyday schlub or a PhD in every science known to man. Nothing, and I mean literally nothing, justifies doxing someone over a political, or in this case personal, disagreement. Finding information on a terrorist or a criminal of some kind? Maybe. But you don't release that shit publicly. You pass it on to the proper authorities. This is just petty vindictive bullshit, and it makes you look like exactly the kind of pathetic, spineless, hypocritical, piss-weak, crybaby pussies that you are. Whoever did this, I have nothing but contempt for your very existence, and I hope you rot for all eternity in a torment of your own making. But I would like to end this story on a higher note, so allow me to use a phrase that I will immediately regret uttering to describe this new internet power couple. I think they're totes adorbs. Yep, just as I thought. Also, I like the cute couple names people have been coming up with for them, like Racy and Green Raygun. I'd like to submit mine for your consideration. Chris Legrun. Oh, and before I forget, I wanted to extend an offer. Now, I know I've been somewhat vitriolic with Lacey in the past, but I'd like to leave that where it is and move forward. In the interest of open dialogue, I would absolutely love to have a discussion with Lacey on stream about consent. She's expressed ideas about it in the past that I've disagreed with, and whether or not she still holds those positions, it's still an interesting topic, and I think it would be good to exchange ideas about it and maybe come to understand each other's perspective a little bit better. Now, I know that in terms of popularity, I'm barely a blip on anyone's radar, even on my best day. So if anything, she'd be doing me a favor. But I don't really care about any of that. I just want to have the discussion so that I can get my arguments out there without feeling feeling like I'm talking to a brick wall. So Lacey, if you ever see this, please don't hesitate to contact me if you're interested in such a discussion. I promise it won't be a mean-spirited debate where both sides try to win. I just want to talk civilly and present you with my ideas about a subject that I think we're both very passionate about. It would be an awesome experience for me, and I'll do my best to make sure that you won't regret it. And now let's talk about the bad. Oh boy, was this one covered a lot already. In fact, I almost made a dead horse video about it. So, aging and failing comedian Kathy Griffin, in a desperate bid to put the AED paddles to her dying career, decided to do a photo shoot wherein she appears with a completely expressionless face, holding a prop made up to look like the bloody severed head of the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Now, there's a lot that I can say about this, but before I get into the meat of this juicy story, let me say this. I am 100% totally and completely in support of freedom of speech and of expression. I do not believe anyone should be prosecuted or jailed for something that they say or a public demonstration of political protest or anything like that. This case is no exception to that stance of mine. However, I've seen people who were defending her saying that it was comedy or a joke, with which I have to disagree. You see, most of the time, even if I think a joke is bad, or I don't find it funny, or I don't laugh, or even chuckle at it, I can usually point out what's supposed to be funny about it. Like with toilet humor, it's funny because biological functions are considered gross and embarrassing despite their inevitability. Even Amy Schumer's black hole of a career is mostly built on the premise that she's a drunken slut, and most of the time women aren't proud of that sort of behavior to the point where they make that their public image. But I don't see how anyone with any sensibilities other than that of a complete sociopath is supposed to laugh at the image of a dead-eyed woman holding a severed head. I don't see what part of that is supposed to split my sides. So please, if you can explain to me where the humor is, feel free to do so in the comments. But no, to me, this is not a tasteless joke or bad comedy, because those descriptors aren't accurate. This was a publicity stunt, plain and simple. And the fact that people called her out on it is the beautiful thing about freedom of speech. It applies to everyone. So ideally, she's allowed to pull her stupid cry for attention, but then everyone else is allowed to criticize her for it. There's no need for legal punishments, as no direct threat was made. And that image going around showing her next to a member of ISIS saying, "I see no difference." Yeah, I see one. The head that the terrorist is holding is fucking real! That's a pretty big fucking difference if you ask me. Also, she made a quick apology video after she started getting backlash for the image, and then she held a press conference where she made really bad jokes, which at least were actual jokes. And oddly enough, she couldn't decide between playing the victim and crying about how Trump was, according to her feelings, personally out to destroy her and how he broke her. She couldn't make up her mind between that and trying to play the Billy Badass and saying stuff like, "I'm gonna keep on making fun of him," and "I'm gonna make fun of him even more now," and stuff like that. It was really weird, but honestly, I couldn't give less of a fuck about Kathy Griffin before or after this, even if you paid me to try. Anyway, I did find it interesting from an intellectual standpoint because this story highlighted for me the massive hypocrisy of both sides of the political spectrum. First, you have the hypocrites of the left, who, as it's already been pointed out by many, would absolutely go batshit outrage overload if a conservative comedian did a photo shoot with a fake severed Obama head. And you know damn well that with that example, they'd be throwing in accusations of racism in a heartbeat. And yet, despite Kathy Griffin repeatedly pointing the finger at old white men in her press conference, no accusations of racism or misandry are being thrown her way, at least not by by the left. Not to mention, the left were defending Kathy Griffin 6 Ways to Sunday and were arguing that she shouldn't lose her job with CNN over it, even though, as far as I know, she only did one show a year, and that's the New Year's Eve show that no one watches or is too drunk to remember having watched the next day. By the way, CNN was within their rights to fire her, but I generally don't think that people should be fired for using their freedom of speech to express controversial opinions. Yet, despite the left's apparent agreement with me on that position, these same fuckwits were calling for the silver-plated head of Bill Maher, ironically a liberal himself, because he had the audacity to make an actual joke during what I believe is a live show that included the word nigger. Stop the fucking presses! A Jew said nigger! Fire him! For those of you who don't know, let me explain the joke. Bill Maher had a senator from some backcountry bumfuck state on his show, and they were small talking about how Bill should visit their retarded Hickville state more often. The senator says something about how they'll get him out working in the fields. Now, as a comedian who specializes in a brand of humor that includes a degree of shock value, Bill's mind immediately went to slavery, because of course it did. And he said, "Senator, please, I'm a house nigger." The joke is that slavery was horrible, and Bill Maher is a rich asshole who probably wouldn't do hard labor even as some PR bullshit for the senator from a state that no one cares about. Also, he's very clearly white, yet he referred to himself as a racial slur generally associated with black people. Do you get it yet? So yeah, the left are hypocrites for wanting to fire Bill Maher for that, but not Kathy Griffin. But the right aren't getting away scot-free on this one because they're hypocrites too. As a brief side note, it's funny how the left was all cancel Colbert when he made the joke about the Cleveland Indians, but then it was the right that was all fire Colbert when he made the one about the cock holster. And any of the latter who criticized the former should do us all a favor and use their mouths as a gun holster. But the hypocrisy I wanted to highlight on the conservative side is very simple. The right are not the champions of freedom of speech that they purport themselves to be. These hip, edgy new conservatards like Steven Crowder, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Paul Joseph Watson want you to think that they're all about the First Amendment and no one gets censored. But just like the extreme left, they only want free speech for themselves and the positions that they agree with. Kathy Griffin does her stupid publicity stunt, and all of a sudden they're reaching to try to make the claim that she committed a crime by making a terroristic threat. But if that were true, you'd also have to lock up Madonna, Snoop Dogg, Marilyn Manson, sorry TJ, and a whole host of other celebrities who've done similar things in the past. Also, I'm pretty sure you'd have to arrest the makers of the show Celebrity Deathmatch. Ultimately, I don't want anyone to be censored, nor do I want anyone to be fired for what they say unless they're acting as a spokesperson for their company at the time. I welcome dissenting voices, and even if they're incredibly vitriolic towards me, I will at the very least hear out their arguments. Only one or two extremely annoying people have been muted on Twitter once their arguments proved fruitless and they themselves proved unrelentingly unreasonable. But aside from that small effort to keep what little sanity I have left, I will never go out of my way to censor people, to create an echo chamber, and I damn sure will never advocate that someone should get fired or locked up for saying something I don't like. And last but not least, we have to talk about the ugly side of humanity. Recently, there have been several terror attacks in the United Kingdom. There was the suicide bombing after the Ariana Grande concert at the Manchester Arena. Then there was another vehicle/knife attack on London Bridge. Now, you may think I'm going to talk about people making jokes about these incidents pretty much right after they happen. Well, not really, because I don't care. In some cases, I'm making those jokes too. Jokes are fine. I have a little bit of a problem with people using fresh tragedies to push political agendas, and especially if they have an I told you so moment, basically gloating about how they're so right about problem X. But that's besides the point. I wanted to talk more about people's general unwillingness to actually do anything productive about these kinds of tragedies. I'm not talking about gun control, especially since neither of the two terrorist attacks I just mentioned involved any guns. I'm talking about this weird cycle of desensitized virtue signaling that we see with each of these attacks, and how it's not providing any practical solutions to the problem. For starters, every single time something like this happens, people always say how their thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. And there's usually a hashtag trending on Twitter with "pray for insert name of the affected city or country here." Well, guess what? Logical reasoning is telling me that all your thoughts and prayers aren't doing jack diddly shit. So while it may be a nice sentiment to some people, and maybe it makes you feel like a good person, it doesn't actually help. So, maybe you might want to actually do something next time instead of just thinking and praying, also known as the two most useless actions in the universe, at least when not paired with action. And if you ask me, we need more actual thinking and less praying. Also, many people will refuse to criticize Islam for its role in rampant religious terrorism overseas out of fear that they will be labeled racist. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but this is ridiculous because Islam is literally not a race. Granted, it may be most prevalent in the Middle East, where a large portion of the population has a somewhat darker skin tone, but by no means does this mean that they are one and the same. Plenty of Middle Eastern people are not Muslim, and plenty of Muslims are of a different skin color. Islam is not a race, it's an ideology. So maybe you accept that, but you're still worried about being called Islamophobic. Now let me tell you why that's ridiculous. Not only is it disingenuous to class an ideology in with an immutable biological fact, such as homosexuality, but it is also not irrational to fear an ideology whose supposedly holy source material explicitly instructs its followers to kill people like you. And yes, I mean you. If you are a living, breathing human being alive on planet Earth, then the Quran probably has a passage in it telling its readers to chop your head off for one reason or another. To fear the insane, violent savages who might actually follow that instruction is not irrational, hence not a phobia. And this might be a cliche argument to make, but as the lovely lewd Trish said on Twitter recently, fuck Godwin's Law. Don't tell me what I can and cannot compare shit to. It doesn't make my arguments any less valid or invalid. Now, you might already know where I'm going with this, but specifically I want to say that during World War II, the only person who might have used the word Nazi-phobic is Joseph fucking Goebbels. And no, I'm not saying that all Muslims are just like the Nazis, but much like Nazism caused the deaths of many people and was a general cancer upon the earth, Islam is currently causing the deaths of many people and is currently a general cancer upon the earth. Granted, today you could probably make a case about people having an irrational fear of Nazis and labeling everyone they don't like as a Nazi so they can morally justify attacking them, at least to themselves. But in Germany during Hitler's reign, such a fear was not so irrational as it is now. I'll readily admit that I don't know that much about the political climate in Europe. I don't even know that much about the religion of Islam and all the nitty-gritty details of its teachings. All I do know is that jihadism is spreading like a cancer throughout Europe, and either there aren't enough truly moderate Muslims who don't believe in using violence to spread their religion, or they just aren't doing much about it. I think an alarming majority, something like 2/3 of Muslims that were surveyed, would not report a terror plot to the authorities if they knew about it in advance. That is unacceptable. In my mind, if you condone acts of violence in the name of your religion, or if you celebrate them after they happen, then you are just as contemptible as the people who actually committed them. Now, I may not have all the answers, but we need to do something as a society to stop this toxic ideology from spreading and claiming even more innocent victims than it already has. Clearly, the walking on eggshells so as not to offend anyone approach hasn't been working. It's time to put human rights and safety above the petty feelings of an imaginary sociopath in the sky and his cowardly barbaric followers. No more Sharia courts, no more blasphemy laws, No more forcing women to wear hijabs. If you support any of that shit, fucking use your freedom of speech to tell me why I'm a dirty, rotten sinner who's gonna burn in hell for all eternity. You know, like the Christians already do. But if you use violence in response to my words, it only shows how pathetically weak your faith, your God, and your pedophile warlord, piss be upon him, really are. Well, on that happy note, I'm going to end the video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. Subscribe if you haven't already, and click the bell icon to turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter and VidMe. I still need more followers on VidMe to lift the upload restrictions, by the way. And if you really enjoy my work, please consider supporting it on Patreon. Any amount you can give to me is greatly appreciated. Or, if you liked that tweet I read you a moment ago, you can donate to lewd Trish and her family of 6. Seeing as how they are currently homeless and tightly packed into one small and shitty hotel room, they could really use all the help they can get. All the links will be in the description, but PayPal is the best way to help with their situation because they use it to pay for the room. Any amount you donate will also be greatly appreciated by me, as well as Trish and her family. As always, thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time. Stay great, apes.